Layer 2 projects are the future of Ethereum scaling, and Optimism is the biggest one that actually has a token. So that makes me wonder, should I buy some while it's cheap? Well, to answer that question, let's analyze it across 6 different categories and then end with my final verdict. But first, a 30-second overview for those who need it. So Optimism is a layer 2 blockchain that helps Ethereum scale. It does so by processing a bunch of transactions on their own blockchain and then posting them in batches to Ethereum. This gives us fast speeds and low fees without sacrificing on security, because layer 2s inherit the security of their underlying layer 1s. The technical name for Optimism's approach is called Optimistic Rollup, and they do have their own governance token called OP. Phew, I got that in on time. But the first thing I want to evaluate is their team, because I don't care how good a project is. If they don't have a strong team, then I'm not going to touch it. Fortunately for Optimism, it looks like they're solid in this area. Their team used to be the famed Plasma Group, which back in 2018 were the chosen ones to fix Ethereum scaling issues. Alas, their plasma tech ended up being the wrong approach, so they had to pivot a few years later. But it wasn't all a waste though, because they were able to build deep ties across the Ethereum community, and that helped them immensely when they started Optimism. Now, when I took a closer look at their team, I came away very impressed by them. But I wasn't the only one impressed though. The famous VC firm A16Z pointed to Optimism's team as the main reason why they invested in them. Also, the DeFi project Synthetics chose to build on Optimism instead of all the other choices out there, and when asked why, they said it's because Optimism has some of the best researchers in the crypto world. So yeah, they got votes of confidence, check, and credentials, check. Now, if you forced me to nitpick a little bit, I would point out that the team mishandled some stuff early on, but overall, I can't complain, and I'm giving them an 8 out of 10 in this category. Next up, we gotta look at the tech, because Optimism is doing some cutting edge stuff here. So there's actually multiple different approaches when it comes to layer 2 scaling, and the category that Optimism falls under is called optimistic rollups. Now, rollups are able to achieve super fast speeds by executing a bunch of transactions on their own blockchain and then rolling it all up into a single transaction to be posted on Ethereum. One key difference between optimistic rollups and other types is that they assume that all transactions are valid by default, so they can skip all the time-consuming computations and proofs that check for validity. Now, this approach makes them 10 to 100x faster than Ethereum, but of course they need a way to protect against false transactions, right? Well, definitely, and that's where their challenge period comes in. That's the multi-day period where you have to wait and see if anyone submits a fraud proof challenging some transaction. And if there is a fraud proof that turns out to be accurate, then the transaction at fault is reversed and the state of the rollup is updated. So yes, that does mean that things are not truly final until the waiting period is over. That's actually one thing I dislike about Optimism, because they make you wait a whopping 7 days before your withdrawal becomes available on Ethereum. Also, Optimism currently has one sequencer that creates all the blocks for their blockchain, so they're super centralized. On the positive side, I like how they're EVM equivalent, which means you can use all the Ethereum tools and dApps on Optimism without changing a thing. I also like how they let you pay gas fees in ETH, because that's just less hassle than having to acquire a whole new token to pay for gas after bridging over. So all things considered, I'm giving them a 7 out of 10 in this category. I actually like ZK rollups more than these optimistic ones, but ZK tech is in its infancy, so in the meantime, rollups like Optimism are the way to go. Okay, I know some of y'all are itching to hear about their token, so let's dissect their tokenomics next. But before we get there, a quick shout out to our video sponsors Binance. You can actually buy Optimism's token on both Binance and Binance US if you decide to. But what I really want to highlight today is their sick trading bots that you can find on their strategy trading page. They have 2 main ones, Spot Grid and Futures Grid. Spot Grid is where the bot places buy and sell orders for you in a certain price range and attempts to buy low and sell high for you. It works best when the price of a coin is volatile and swinging between a specific range. Like, it would have been amazing for Bitcoin the past few weeks, as it's been going sideways between 18 to 24K. Futures Grid is a little similar to Spot Grid, but the difference is that it lets you trade with leverage, so you can go long or short with your grid strategy as well. There's some great explainers and tutorials on their website if you want more info, but overall, I think it's quite simple to use. So if you're interested and you don't have a Binance account yet, go sign up, use my link below to to get a deposit bonus up to $600. Okay, so Optimism's ticker symbol is OP, and they have an initial supply of 4.3 billion tokens with a steady 2% annual inflation rate. 64% of the initial supply was allocated to their community, which is awesome, but that's going to be diluted real quick, because right now they have around 200 million tokens circulating. But if you look at their unlock schedule, you'll see that their supply is projected to reach 2 billion in the next year. So that's a 10x increase in circulating supply. And all I can say is, good luck to the bag holders, because a tsunami of selling pressure is about to come. Now, something else that worries me is that their token is bad at capturing value. Like their sequencer that I mentioned earlier, that actually generates revenue for them. But instead of benefiting the token holders somehow, that revenue goes towards their ecosystem fund instead. They also plan on giving out retroactive grants to teams, plus they have several more community airdrops coming in the future. So all I see is a wave of selling pressure in the future, and I'm wondering, where's the demand gonna come from to counteract that? I honestly don't see any, because their token is for governance. So even if their network grows, it doesn't lead to increased demand for their token. That's why I gotta give them a 4 out of 10 when it comes to tokenomics, because there's just too many red flags here. Now, speaking of governance, they're doing some really special stuff here that Vitalik Buterin praised himself. So if you hold their OP token, it lets you participate in the Optimism Collective, which is a 2-tier governance system that I've never seen before. They have a token house and a citizens house that makes up the 2 equal chambers of their government. And the point here is to balance short-term versus long-term incentives for the project. Like, the token house is the one that makes the technical decisions, while the citizens house makes the funding decisions. Vitalik Buterin actually gave them a shout out for this innovative approach, because he likes how it represents the interests of people who may use Optimism a lot, but not hold their OP tokens. Something else that's unique here is that their citizens house actually uses the brand new soul-bound NFTs to designate membership. These are NFTs that you cannot transfer to someone else. It's tied to your address forever. So I think that property makes it a great fit for the citizens house. Overall, I love what they're doing with governance, but it is still early, so I'm giving them a 7 out of 10 here, and I can't wait to see how it plays out. Now, one thing I like to evaluate for every project is their track record, because that can give us clues about where they're headed in the future. So as I was researching the history of Optimism, 2 major events stood out to me: their big airdrop and the subsequent hack. Their airdrop was highly anticipated by everyone, but it had some hiccups to say the least. Like, they accidentally sent 20 million tokens to the wrong address. They were working with a service provider called Wintermute who would manage their airdrop distribution for them. But there was some miscommunication, and the Optimism team sent their tokens to a Wintermute address that wasn't properly deployed yet, so they lost access. Now, Wintermute said, no worries, it's fine. But one day later, those tokens got hacked by someone who stole all $35 million worth. Fortunately, the hacker decided to play nice and return most of those tokens. But overall, that was a huge black mark on their track record. That wasn't the only hiccup though, because a few months later, the price of OP crashed suddenly, and miscommunication was the culprit once again. Some people noticed that a large amount of tokens were moving from the team's wallet, and a rumor spread that they got hacked again. Turns out it was a planned movement from the team to a custodian that they were using, so it wasn't a problem after all. And the team apologized and was like, sorry guys, we should have let you know beforehand. But as you can imagine, the community was pissed, and they didn't want to forgive the team for that. Overall, their track record hasn't been the smoothest, but it is early for them, so if they continue to build and avoid these hiccups, then we're just gonna forget about these in the future. But for now, I have to give them a 5 out of 10 here. Now, when we evaluate projects, we can't just rate them in a bubble. We gotta look at their competition too. So Optimism's top competitor is Arbitrum, which is also an optimistic rollup. They both use the same underlying technology for scaling, but there are some key differences between the two. Like, Arbitrum has fraud proofs that are cheaper and more efficient than Optimism's. And Arbitrum's virtual machine is way more flexible in terms of the programming languages it supports. Now, Optimism has some exciting tech upgrades on their roadmap, which should level the playing field a bit. But Arbitrum also has their own huge upgrade called Nitro that's going to bring them to the next level. On the ecosystem side, Arbitrum has more total value locked, and they account for over 50% of the layer 2 market share, while Optimism only has around 30%. This This is actually impressive given that Arbitrum does not have a token to give out for incentives, so people must really like using them. Also, Arbitrum has more dApps than Optimism and a larger community on social media. Overall, it looks like Optimism has an uphill battle to catch their competitor. That's why I'm giving them a 6 out of 10 when it comes to competitive advantage. Alrighty, it's time to roll it all up into a final verdict. And for that, I give them a 6 out of 10. It's honestly a bit lower than what I would have guessed before doing my research. But they do have a few areas I can't get over, like their tokenomics and stiff competition. That said, they are still a quality project, so I will be keeping my eyes on them. And if you like this type of fundamental review video, then be sure to watch this one about Lido Finance.